The insurrection of the gladiators and the devastation of Italy, commonly called the War of Spartacus, began upon this occasion. One Lentulus Batiatus trained up a great many gladiators in Capua, most of them Gauls and Thracians, who, not for any fault of them committed, but simply through the cruelty of their master, were kept in confinement for the object of fighting with one another. 200 of these formed a plan to escape, but their plot being discovered, those of them who became aware of it in time to anticipate their master, being 78, got out of a cook's shop, chopping knives and spits, and made their way through the city, and lighting by the way on several wagons that were carrying gladiators' arms to another city, they seized upon them and armed themselves, and seizing upon a defensible place, they chose 3 captains, of whom Spartacus was chief, a Thracian of one of the nomad tribes, and a man not only of high spirit and valiant, also and in gentleness superior to his condition, and more of a Greek than the people of his country usually are. First, then, routing those that came out of Capua against them, and thus procuring a quantity of proper soldiers' arms, they gladly threw away their own as barbarous and dishonorable. 2 praetors who were sent against them with small armies were defeated, while a 3rd general's army was routed and he himself slain. After many successful skirmishes with Varenus, the praetor himself, in one of which Spartacus took his lictors and his own horse, he began to be great and terrible, but wisely considering that he was not to expect to match the force of the empire, he marched his army towards the Alps, intending, when he had passed them, that every man should go to his own home, some to Thrace, some to Gaul. But they grew confident in their numbers and puffed up with their success, would give no obedience to him, but went about and ravaged Italy, so that now the Senate was not only moved at the indignity and baseness both of the enemy and of the insurrection, but, looking upon it as a matter of alarm and of dangerous consequence, sent out both the consuls to it, as to a great and difficult enterprise. The consul, Gellius, falling suddenly upon a party of Germans who, through contempt and confidence, had straggled from Spartacus, cut them all to pieces. But when Lentulus with a large army besieged Spartacus, he sailed out upon him, and joining battle, defeated his chief officers and captured all his baggage. As he made towards the Alps, Cassius, who was praetor of that part of Gaul that lies about the Po, met him with 10,000 men, but being overcome in battle, he had much ado to escape himself, with the loss of a great many of his men. The Senate, in disgust, now sent Crassus against the rebels. Spartacus, however, defeated Mummius, Crassus's lieutenant, and the general had to restore discipline among the demoralized Romans by executing 50 who had begun the flight. Later he advanced again, but Spartacus retreated through Lucania towards the sea, and in the straits, meeting with some Cilician pirate ships, he had thoughts of attempting Sicily, where by landing 2,000 men, he hoped to kindle anew the war of the slaves, which was but lately extinguished and seemed to need but little fuel to set it burning again. But after the pirates had struck a bargain with him and received his earnest, they deceived him and sailed away. He thereupon retired again from the sea and established his army in the peninsula of Rhegium. Here Crassus tried to blockade him. Spartacus escaped with part of his army to Lucania, but some of Spartacus's followers mutinied and left him. This division of malcontents was soon destroyed by Crassus. Spartacus, after this embarrassment, retired to the mountains of Petelia, but Quintius, one of Crassus's officers, and Scrofula, the quaestor, pursued and overtook him. But when Spartacus rallied and faced them, they were utterly routed and fled, and had much ado to carry off their quaestor, who was wounded. This success, however, ruined Spartacus because it encouraged the slaves, who now disdained any longer to avoid fighting or to obey their officers, but as they were upon their march, they came to them with their swords in their hand and compelled them to lead them back again through Lucania against the Romans, the very thing which Crassus was eager for news was already brought that Pompey, Crassus's rival for military glory, was at hand, and people began to talk openly that the honor of this war was reserved for him, who would come and at once oblige the enemy to fight and put an end to the war. Crassus, therefore, eager to fight a decisive battle, encamped very near the enemy and began to build defensive fortifications. But the slaves made a sally and attacked the pioneers. As fresh supplies came in on either side, Spartacus, seeing there was no avoiding it, set all his army in array, and when his horse was brought to him, he drew out his sword and slayed him, saying if he got the day, he should have a great many better horses of the enemies, and if he lost it, he should have no need of this. And so making directly towards Crassus himself, through the midst of arms and wounds, he missed him, but slew 2 centurions that fell upon him together. At last, being deserted by those that were about him, he himself stood his ground, and surrounded by the enemy, bravely defending himself, was cut to pieces.